So yeah, hi everyone, and this is our first live webinar, and we have our guest Madeline with us. She has a lot of experience working on pricing strategies in various software companies, and she's kindly agreed to spend some time talking about the thought process behind pricing strategies and when you might want to think about usage-based pricing or hybrid sort of pricing models where subscriptions and some component of usage kicks in, and even within usage, when to think about postpaid, when to think about prepaid, and how you can package different sorts of pricing plans together. So yeah, maybe I'll give you a brief introduction to myself, and then Madeline can introduce herself in a little more detail. So I'm a co-founder at Zenskar. I primarily look at product and technology here. I also help with content and business strategy. And yeah, like we at Zenskar are building an end-to-end financial operations automation software with a focus on billing, collections, and accounting. Specifically revenue recognition and all the journal entries that are relevant to the revenue side of your business. So yeah, over to you, Madeline. We'd love to know a little bit about you and your background.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. Excited to be here, and great topic to chat about today. So yes, my name is Madeline Stein. I've been working in pricing for a long time now. Started early days in sort of a consulting space. Have worked across industries and have been in tech across different SaaS companies. SendGrid, Twilio, HubSpot, now at Algolia over the past, I think, sort of 6 to 8 years of my pricing career. I think it's a space that continually changes and always sort of presents lots of interesting strategic and business-driven conversations. So always enjoy talking about this topic with people who are equally interested in pricing and different strategies and go-to-market strategies.
Yeah, thanks for that, Madeline. This is a topic that's like super fascinating to me, and me personally, and would love to pick your brains on this, given that you've worked on this for so long. So yeah, maybe to start with, we can. It'd be great to start off with just what is pricing strategy? Like, what do you think of when you think about how to price?
Yeah, for sure. Great topic, and kind of it opens it up really broadly, which I like. The way I think about sort of pricing strategy, and really it's not just pricing, I think. First of all, often pricing is the term that I use a lot, but it really encompasses the model. So how do you charge, the amount that you charge? It factors in packaging, so your features and functionality and how you bring those to market in compelling offers, and then your overall monetization and go-to-market play. Are you product-led growth and really very much self-serve focused? Are you more sort of enterprise sales-led focused, or somewhere in between? The way I think about sort of the pricing, packaging, monetization strategy, it's really the vehicle for how your company is going to generate revenue. And generate revenue also means acquire customers, retain those customers, and help those customers expand. So it's really core and kind of an offshoot of what is your overall company direction and strategy, your product strategy, your go-to-market strategy. You want all of those things in line to then define a compelling pricing, packaging, and monetization strategy.
Awesome. So you mentioned the company side of things, right?
Yeah.
So from the company side, we are trying to grow, and we would like to price a certain way. And you mentioned the customer side, where something that's something that makes sense to the customer. Can you talk about the business problems, specific metrics that make sense from the customer side, and how you think about the customer point of view when you think about pricing strategy?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so one of the frameworks I use is I always think about, pricing, packaging, and monetization. It's really a balance of managing customer value perception, customer objectives with the business objectives, and how do you sort of mirror those two and achieve both goals. I think for customers and sort of the objectives, what's the value that they get out of your product or service? They're, if we use jobs to be done framework, they're looking at your product to do a certain job for them and meet a certain need. They have some sort of buying process, budget considerations that you want to think about, and a perception of your brand and the value they get out of your product relative to alternative solutions out there. And all of that sort of factors into the customer view and how much they're willing to pay and how they want to buy your product. On the business side of things, it's about finding sort of the right pricing and packaging model, the right metrics to help drive customer acquisition, retention, expansion, so your NDR metrics, as well as thinking about your overall average revenue and managing margins as well. So the cost and profit side of things. So those are kind of all the different levers that we look at when thinking about a pricing strategy and different models that could work for different products and different companies.
Got it. So diving a little bit deeper on the customer side, different customers could get value from your product in different ways. Mm-hmm. So how do you tackle this sort of a problem when you think about pricing?
Yeah, for sure. So the way I tackle the problem, there's sort of the strategic lens and then sort of like the tactical, what are some actionable things that you can actually go out to understand this. So from the strategic lens and sort of the pricing and packaging theory, it's all about really understanding how is your customer getting value out of the products and services that you offer them? And that can often sort of dictate or help to kind of guide you in the direction you want to go with a specific pricing model or pricing strategy. Is there compelling recurring revenue and monthly recurring revenue? Is there an incremental value that your customer gets the more that they use your product or your service, which can, also inform your pricing and packaging metrics? Do you have multi-products? Is it, a bundling play? Are there things that you can do to get customers adopting and using more of your features, more of your products that you offer? I think tactically, some of the things to really uncover, how does a customer want to buy? How are they thinking about understanding your customer's buying process? So, going out and talking to your customers, looking at review sites, looking at competitors, and understanding what are the alternatives out there, what are they evaluating from like a customer lens when they're not on the inside and they don't have that lens. I think talking to your customers and understanding how they get value, what's most valuable to them, and flat out just asking them around their willingness to pay, prices they expect to pay, understanding their budget and total cost of ownership, who makes those types of decisions. Those are some things that you can get directly from customers to help inform elements of your pricing and packaging strategy as well.
Interesting. And you mentioned a couple of things there. One was whether the value that customers get, is it recurring, or whether it's whether it increases with the amount of use of the product. So are there specific metrics that you use to that you measure as goals to your pricing strategy experiment? So when would you how would you say whether your pricing model experimentation, whether it's working or whether it's not?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great question. So I think I'll separate sort of some of the experimentation pieces from sort of your core pricing strategy. The way I think about assessing, is our pricing working or not? There's a few different levers. Number one kind of comes back to what are the strategic goals of your business overall, and then how is your pricing helping or creating friction points in those? So as an example, if you're playing, a lot of it comes down to segmentation. If you say, hey, we're going after, as an example, SMB customers, and we want them to self-serve, and we have customer acquisition goals. Well, are you hitting those goals or not? And if the answer is no, is there feedback or indicators that pricing is a barrier? Are customers churning quite quickly, especially after maybe getting their first invoice? Are customers are they not activated? Are there, barriers to adopting your product, or are you hearing feedback in the market that it's too expensive to get started? That could be an indicator that you have some acquisition challenges that could be pricing related. If your goals are sort of more revenue focused and if you never hear any complaints about pricing, that's an indication that you might be too cheap. If your goals are, increase ASP, go up market, and you're not seeing that expansion, there might be an opportunity to consider, raising prices. If you have a monthly recurring subscription or a flat fee model and you see very different usage patterns in your data, that could be an indicator that there might be a metric in how your customers use your product that gives them a ton of value that they're willing to pay for. And then that starts to introduce sort of the concept of bringing usage into your pricing model as well.
Got it. Very interesting. And you mentioned usage, right? Like when if customers are getting value based on their usage of your product, then that's an opportunity to price based on usage. So maybe we can double click into that, and would love to hear your thoughts on understanding nuances of usage-based pricing, and when would you consider that usage is, pricing based on usage is something that we should evaluate? Because there are a lot of challenges with usage. Like there's a lot of extra stuff that you need to track. Subscriptions are simple. You'd say like $1,000 a month, it's done, dusted. With usage, there's like all this complexity with infrastructure and downstream systems. So yeah, would to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, let's dive in. It's a big topic. I think so. I think to start out with, like, usage is something that has increased in, I think, popularity, and certainly increased in just the interest and the lens on it over the past, I would say, 3 to 5 years maybe. There's just a lot more that is being talked about. There's a lot more companies that over the past few years have started to incorporate elements of usage into their pricing and packaging. And that's something that, the companies I've worked for within the tech space, like, we've always had some sort of element of usage, and I've seen it become more and more prevalent within the SaaS space. I think one of the things that's really key to point out is that usage isn't one size fits all, and usage-based pricing, sometimes it can sort of default to mean like a consumption model, like true pay-as-you-go. That's really only like one flavor of usage. What is actually more common, and has been very common in sort of the different companies and worlds I've lived in, is a hybrid model. So there's lots of different ways to use usage. So just, I think, for a few examples, just for folks listening, like when I was at SendGrid, we had a monthly subscription fee. That fee included an allotment of the number of emails you get. So it's a usage metric. There was something that we count that you use up each month. And then if you exceeded that allotment, there was an overage charge. So no one was blocked from, sending more emails, and we were capturing revenue. So as customers grow, it gave them the flexibility to send as many emails they needed and kind of scale and grow as they needed to. But then we sort of got the revenue and the benefits of charging for those incremental emails. Similar model, HubSpot had a subscription fee on their marketing product, and then they also charged for the contacts. So the contacts that the customer or an HubSpot customer actually markets to, those are valuable to the customer. They're getting value out of having those customers and growing that contact list. And then as a result, that gives us another lever to charge on. Algolia and Twilio, they have a slightly different model with a pay-as-you-go option for self-serve. So you come in, and for every search request you do, every SMS message you send, there's a charge. And as we go up market and we get larger and larger deals, then we have a kind of a commit model where you agree to an annual contract for a fixed allotment at a specific rate. And that helps to manage some of the predictability that can be a challenge with usage-based pricing. We'll get into some of the challenges later, but it just shows there's like a lot of different flavors of usage. And ultimately, the core goal is that customers get more value out of each of those products by using more. And then each of the companies is able to capture more of that value as companies grow and scale.
Got it. And of the examples you mentioned, if I had to split them into the pay-as-you-go sort of usage-based model and the upfront commit sort of model, can you talk a little bit about the differences between the two and why you would pick one over the other? Like, why not always go with an upfront commit? Why use it based? Why go with a pay-as-you-go model?
Yeah, for sure. I think at the end of the day, I think, why go with one or the other? It comes down to, this is where the customer piece comes in, right? Keeping in mind that, customer needs and their expectations, you should never think about that separately. That always kind of relates very much to your company objectives and what you're trying to achieve. Quite often, choosing one or the other is about what is the customer pain point, the customer need, the customer expectation that you're solving for. So sometimes sort of the true pay-as-you-go motion versus having an initial monthly payment or annual payment, that can be a perception of fairness or adhering to the idea of truly just pay for exactly what you use. So with Twilio, with Algolia, you can get started and there's no upfront fee. So no one is ever paying a monthly subscription fee and then not using all of it. There's sort of pros and cons to the customer side and the company side. On the customer side, their pricing and sale, they're never paying for a unit that they don't use, but it can introduce a little bit less predictability into their monthly spend. That monthly fee, like we had at SendGrid, it keeps things simple, straightforward, predictable month over month, but it can be a pain point where customers feel like they don't sort of use up their full allotment. At the end of the day, this kind of comes back to just really understanding your customer base and what is going to make the most sense for the majority of the type of customer you're targeting. And that can come through like research, interviews, and some in-market testing as well.
Got it. So it's so from what I understand, it's a trade-off between what's more favorable for the seller versus what's more favorable for the buyer.
Correct. Yeah. And I think at the end of the day, the way I think about it as a company, both models can work. Which one works the best, and not taking a customer-led approach. If it's going to work well for the customer, then inherently does that also meet the goals of the company.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. And in some cases, like, how can a company know if usage-based pricing is actually not a good fit for them? Even if it sounds like it might work for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it comes back to a few things. So number one, do you have customer friction points or friction points in your business model where you are not seeing leverage, but you have different customers using different amounts and usage continues to increase in some way? That could be sort of an indication of like, okay, maybe we're like missing out on something. Conversely, if you have a model that usage doesn't necessarily scale, or how your customers get value out of the product doesn't really align with an easy to understand, easy to track and bill metric, that might be an indication that you need to kind of go in a different direction. I think sort of picking the usage-based metric, it's not that it flat out wouldn't work in a lot of cases, it's that you have to kind of think about how does it work for you in what circumstances and how to implement it in a way that is best for your customers and your objectives.
Yeah, that makes sense. It'd be weird to pay per TV show stream on Netflix.
Exactly. Yeah.
Great. So okay. So let's assume that usage-based pricing works, and we spoke about it being harder to actually set up in a company compared to like a one-time price or a recurring fixed subscription. So can you talk a little bit about, given that you have so much experience with companies that have price based on usage, like what are the biggest challenges that people see when trying to transition to usage-based pricing or trying to introduce usage-based pricing in their company?
For sure. Yeah, I think there's two big buckets of challenges where I think it's worth spending a lot of time talking about. So number one is strategic alignments. We've talked a little bit about the customer lens, the business lens. At the end of the day, especially if this is something that you're pivoting to from an existing, like a true just monthly subscription fee, that strategic alignment, does it make financial sense? Is it going to, help move your company towards the goals that you're looking to do? That's a really important area to spend time on, and something that can, kind of cause some friction in making a transition to usage. The other piece is some of the systems and the operational consideration. I always say, like, don't sleep on systems. Don't figure out all the strategy stuff and then start to talk about systems. The systems and the operational piece is key to being successful. You can have a great strategy on paper. If you can't execute it, it's not going to work out for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. So maybe we can dive a little bit deeper into each of these independently. On the strategic side, you mentioned that it has to align with the company's strategy. Like, what does a good strategy look like? Can you give an example of someone that might have been on a subscription price, and then like this was a strategic reason why they chose to go with usage-based pricing?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that at a strategic level, like when we, I think Twilio is a great example. They've had usage-based pricing for sort of the course of their lifetime. Like, it existed when I joined them, and it lived on through my time there. And one of the things there was, like, it was core to their go-to-market motion and their overall strategy of, like, just get started easily. So you weren't entered into any commitment. Any developer could sign up for the product, start using the product, and then just start to pay in, like, very small increments. So it really removes barriers to entry of upfront costs that you have to consider. So if your goal is, hey, let's acquire customers and we don't want pricing to be a barrier, usage-based in the form of pay-as-you-go can do that. I think with also kind of sticking on the theme of customer acquisition, with SendGrid, we had a monthly fee, but we also had a free tier and a free trial. So you were able to get started for no cost. When you hit a certain usage threshold, you upgrade to a paid plan. But we kept the price of that plan, although it did increase over time. It was a relatively low entry point. So again, it wasn't a huge barrier to entry with enough usage that we knew it was going to meet the vast majority of customer needs. So that kind of covers the usage piece. So it sort of fit in with that strategy around acquiring lots of customers on the low end in a self-serve manner. You didn't have to get into a sales conversation just to start using the product. Mm-hmm. And there was sort of, you could start to see revenue patterns there. On the revenue and the margin side of things, so as you kind of think about larger deals, usage gave us good levers to help scale. So as customers use more, we could get bigger and bigger deals, both within those companies. That's something that, we work on with Algolia. As you launch different, new products, you layer those on with usage, and it's kind of just like that flywheel. It keeps going as you use more, as you acquire more products and adopt more features and functionality. You have a means to continue to scale your revenue. And, the margin piece of it, getting just like the unit economics right, is where then you can ensure that your margin criteria are met.
Got it. Interesting. Like having a baseline that's easy to get into, and then like increasing over time. And if we had to talk a little about the systems side of things, sure. You mentioned that a good strategy is nice on paper, but it's pointless if you don't have the systems. Would love to hear your thoughts on, like what these problems are. How can they be avoided? How can you think about it upfront, like during your strategy process?
Yeah, for sure. I'll break down the systems. I think they fit into, there's like the actual, your billing system, your CPQ system, if you have one. And then there is the processes and the operational considerations around, go to market and enablement and things. On the system side of things, what I have seen and lived through in my experience is that quite often billing systems are built to do the first model that a company has when it initially launches and starts charging for a product. So if a company launches, in their very, very early days and they have a monthly subscription fee, their billing system can do monthly subscription fees. Making that transition to introduce new metrics, like new things to count, being able to count those things across probably a lot of different systems, not just within billing, but within product tracking, within scoping, all of these different areas where you have to track. That's a thing that has to be factored into billing. Being able to handle different models or different ways of doing usage. If you have an overage model, if you are pure pay as you go, all of that can often introduce kind of a rehaul of a billing system. And those types of projects, they can take quarters, and there's usually competing priorities for those teams that are often, not that large. Those introduce then like a build versus buy decision as well for your billing systems. Are you going to build this in-house, or are you going to go out and find a tool that you can layer onto your billing system to help with pricing strategy transitions? So that's kind of one piece of it. And my advice whenever I talk to companies, and also like something that I do internally, is I always try and think about, okay, while we are thinking about options, do you go usage-based? Do you introduce a hybrid model like subscription fee plus usage, or pure pay as you go? Start to have those operational conversations really early on. Understand what's the level of effort from a system standpoint to make some of those changes, because that can inform the decision about which model do you go with, alongside with like the customer input, the sales input, the company strategy input. Some of the other like systems and implementation things to consider: revenue recognition. This is one, if you have an annual or a monthly fee, you recognize revenue in a certain way, exactly how much money you're getting each month. That's going to change if you do usage-based. It just inherently introduces a variable component into your revenue that you have to account for, and how you are able to recognize revenue is an important thing. So talk to your controller and your revenue accounting team. And I think also on that, your reporting, how do you report on metrics that can be variable month over month? If you're used to an ARR model, like annual recurring revenue, how do you start to account and report out on something that's going to be variable, and what sort of impact does that have on how you think about total revenue and customer acquisition? And then if you have a whether it's a self-serve model, a sales-led model, or both, how does a customer understand and estimate the amount that they're going to use of a thing? Whether it is a hybrid model or a pay-as-you-go model, you want your customers, there's that kind of balance of like fairness, predictability, and flexibility that you're always trying to strike. So giving them the tools, thinking about how your sales team can help a prospective customer estimate their usage, and then sort of slot into a plan, a subscription tier, or like a usage-based commit structure from there is really important. So summarize it. Yeah, your billing systems and your CPQ systems, revenue recognition, and then certainly your scoping and your estimation as well.
Yeah,
and all of those things, they layer up into helping to design that strategy as well.
Yeah, that's super interesting to hear, because a lot of conversations that we've had as a provider, as a vendor for this sort of stack, is that the operations team bears the brunt of the contracts that are sold. So people get to know after a deal signed, the repercussions of the price, and and then there's like all this scrambling to get everything in place. So it's very interesting that you've seen this like whole life cycle all the way to like the journal entries, in the pricing strategy sort of discussion. Have you seen cases where this has gone like severely wrong, where where these two are not like really well aligned, and it really caused like a lot of delays in implementation?
Where it seems like the strategy and the implementation are not well aligned, or where I've just seen usage-based pricing not go
Yeah, both. I was talking more about the second, but
okay.
yeah, both.
Yeah, for sure. So I think on the second, like, where have I seen usage-based pricing not go well? In my personal experience, and I don't want to speak for like all examples out there because I'm sure that there's some. In my personal experience, I haven't seen it sort of really fundamentally like not work. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one is that inherently in between the sort of the marketing and the email market and developer tools, sort of, Twilio with communications, Algolia with search. Developer tools developer tools were at the forefront of usage-based pricing and still are. And that model, that usage-based model, really resonates well sort of with those tools in the developer market. So it's kind of almost the default in some ways.
I was talking more from the operational point of view.
Oh, okay.
Seen that operationally things were not sort of discussed very well before they came up with, before someone said, oh, like we should do usage-based pricing. And
I think for sure. Yeah, sorry. No, I misunderstood which direction you wanted to go in. I think the operational side of things, it's not, I haven't seen it, fully, break. Thankfully, I think, and part of that I think comes back to the fact that we try and plan for these things up front. More so, I think where the challenges lie is it can be in the expectations of how quickly can we get something to market versus the reality of doing it in a way that isn't going to break those systems, and then some of the the trade-offs and the considerations to make those changes while there is usually some desire to get it to market quickly. So then it becomes a point of, okay, what are the must-have system requirements? What has to be maybe layered on? What has to be built from scratch? And where can we augment or do things a little bit in a janky way for at least a period of time to get things out to market. I think this also, it comes into the idea of like pilots and experimentation. If you want to test out usage-based pricing, that can be, sometimes that becomes sort of, back to the idea of strategic alignment. People want to see and prove and get comfortable with the model. Doing a pilot is kind of, you're trying to live in those both worlds. Like you want to prove out a model can work or not work. It's okay if it doesn't, but you want to test out that hypothesis around usage-based pricing before you do all the investment in the systems to launch it at full scale. And so I think where it's important is thinking about what can you do with the existing systems, contracting, tools that you have to launch a pilot and test things out while you kind of work on how are you going to build this at scale to support all of your customers. And that's one that usually it takes, I say, like, you want to get your billing folks, your CPQ folks in a room, start to brainstorm, start to kind of talk through different options. And then, I kind of, it's like a risk reward rubric of what do you get out of the pilot? What can you do? What might fundamentally break things?
Got it. And can you, talking about experimentation, maybe we can, talk about that briefly before we close this out and open it to Q&A. So have you, can you give instances of how you've experimented with pricing, especially when you don't have stuff set up operationally?
Yeah, there's a couple instances. One actually that comes to mind is far back in my SendGrid days. We were launching a new product. We were in the midst, we had done a bunch of research. We were confident in the model that we were going to, but we hadn't actually built out the functionality and implemented yet. And the core hypothesis that we were testing was around just adoption and willingness to pay. So before we were ready to go with our full sort of new packaging and model on our marketing product, we just put a beta product out. The beta product was ready. The beta product got launched. We just said, okay, billing part's not ready. Here's a charge. And we sort of defaulted to piloting this new product with a monthly subscription fee while we built out the usage components on new metrics for that product. So it was a way to still charge for the product while we did the system stuff. In other companies, we've done sort of pilots where like on the back end, we can kind of, tweak the contract, tweak how we provision and sort of count certain things, like in the way that we design the contract. But the underlying mechanism, the underlying billing metric is still the same. And it changes, it starts to test out the sales motion around new metrics and around using usage before all of the underlying work is done. So sometimes it's just about getting creative with like contract terms and how you kind of counter show things to customers.
Very interesting. Can you dig a little bit deeper into that? I'm just curious before we end this. Like, what do you mean by you might have the same underlying system but price it a little differently?
Yeah. So I think without sort of getting into too many very specific details that are unique here, but as an example, if you say like, well, we count the number of customer contacts that are in our system based on if you can market to more contacts, if you can do that. Well, you can sort of maybe tweak the price per contact, or start to write in some different terms in the contract around limits, or what happens if customers go over certain limits. Start to incorporate things like the idea of an overage or a pay-as-you-go model. If certain things happen, that can be that you're setting yourselves up that they can be like in your contract terms, they can be implemented, but they're not sort of broadly at scale. And really then, like, I think the big thing is like narrowing like the scope and how many customers are you trialing this against, so it doesn't become sort of overwhelming to some of those teams.
Got it. Awesome. So I think thanks a lot for answering all these questions patiently. It's super insightful, and maybe we can open this up for questions. We don't have too much time left, so we'll take maybe just a couple. So we have one. How should one think about pricing when bundling multiple products together?
Great question. And I think it's a great question. And I think this is actually one that is really interesting, depending on whether you have a flat, pure subscription model for products, a seat-based model or a per user model for products, or a usage-based model for products. So if you have a pure subscription model for products, it becomes a little bit easier because you can actually just create a new SKU, you price that as the sum with some sort of discount. As you get into the usage piece, what's interesting is if you have multiple products and the usage rate on those is very, very different. I think two things to consider. One is, do you want to start to introduce like a fixed use bundle? So you get, X amount of product A and Y amount of product B at some total, monthly or annual spend, and then sort of an overage rate if you exceed that. The challenge there is always, how do you get those amounts? How do you figure out the right amount of A and the right amount of B to meet your customers? So my recommendation there is like pick a well-defined segment if that's something you want to start out and target. The other side of it is you come up with a new, per unit cost for that bundle. If your products are pretty close in cost a la carte, then, again, kind of you can figure out the discounting and apply. If your products are very, very different in cost as individual a la carte products, then it can get a little bit more difficult because one either becomes very, very cheap, and the other one becomes very, very expensive. So again, I would, at that stage, if you want to kind of go in that direction of like a bundled usage-based price for something, I would advocate, like, you want to kind of go back and really understand the value of each of those products and the willingness to pay for the combined bundle relative to the trade-offs. And that can come through like some, customer conversations, through research, to start to uncover like how customers think about the price point there. So different ways to do bundling, again, fixed use, tweaking your unit price, and then starting to think about the willingness to pay and the needs of the segment you're targeting with the bundle.
Got it. Interesting. And like bundling is so hard because you see all these plans where you say like bronze, silver, gold, and then you have these relative numbers, and you wonder like how they found these relative numbers. Sometimes like I want to use one of these things, a lot of one of these things, and nothing of the other thing. And then there's always that challenge, between the user and the person actually creating the bundles.
For sure. Yeah. And I think that's like, HubSpot has a bundle of their whole CRM, like the CRM suite. So all of the different products together. It can be a great vehicle to get customers in the door. If the total price is right and it's something that, you're managing the price, it can be a great way to give customers access to more stuff. The expectation is it might take them more time to start adopting. Not everyone's going to use everything all at once. So it's sort of about thinking about the customer journey too, of like, when are they going to start to use different features, different functionality, different products, and selling the bundle is an upfront way to get started easily. I think especially over the past couple of years with teams looking to, we're still spending on software, but looking to, be really efficient with that spend on software. Bundling can be sort of a nice way to do that. It just comes down to understanding kind of how does a customer want to buy and how do they expect to use different products at different stages in their journey.
Got it. We have more questions. Maybe we'll take one more. How do I run a pricing experiment? What are all the parameters that I can play with? That's
good question. So I would say this, it's not necessarily that there's a single right way to run an experiment. Be really intentional with your hypotheses, and that will kind of, to your second part of the question around the parameters to play with, that will sort of help to dictate what parameters you want to play with given your hypothesis. My advice, if you're doing a pilot and experiment, don't try and change too many things because it becomes too hard to actually figure out what did work and what didn't work. Try and sort of like isolate some of those variables. There's lots that's written about like A/B testing around pricing and pricing experiments. I think for A/B testing, that some of the things to just be cognizant of, if that's an approach you're considering, is number one, do you have enough traffic to actually A/B test something? Number two, what happens to the variant that you don't go with at the end of the experiment? Is that something, are you in a situation where like, now you have this very small group of customers that's going to live on like some different pricing plan that has like, sort of longer term implications, or are you willing to forgo that? Number three, what is the potential perception, good or bad, around fairness? If you're just trying to test prices and someone pays more for something, is that going to create sort of some downstream negative, brand or fairness perceptions? If you can do a pilot or isolate some new pricing to a certain, regional group or maybe, segment of your buyers, that can be a way other than A/B testing to actually sort of put something in market and test it out. If you have a sales-led motion and you want to test out, a new offer or a price increase, those are the things you can do where like in cases where your pricing or plans or elements of it aren't public, there's things you can test out with sales because it's not, publicly available information. You can sell it, and you can gather kind of that feedback through the sales process.
Got it. Great. I think we have a couple more questions. Maybe we'll take one last. I also have one. Okay, let's take this one. The last one. What are some critical internal requirements prior to implementing usage-based pricing in an organization? I think you covered like a bit of this. Maybe you can talk a little more specific.
Yeah, I think just I'll to reiterate some of the key points around, number one, what is the business plan? What are the financial expectations? That goes a long way in sort of trying to align on the strategic direction, what you expect it to do across your key metrics. How do your systems, are they set up to bill for a usage-based component? And sort of that has to be applicable, especially if you have a self-serve, model, like a monthly model, a monthly billing model with credit card. You have to be able to charge customers the right amount for their usage. Reporting, can you track on the actual usage as well as the corresponding revenue of that usage? Revenue recognition, making sure that your revenue recognition rules align to usage-based pricing. And then, scoping and estimation and predictability. helping customers understand how much are they going to use and how much are they going to potentially spend for that usage.
Cool. I think one last thing from this is a personal question from my side, like how with usage-based pricing, how do you think about optimizing working capital and cash flows?
Yeah, I think good question there. I think on the cash flow side of things, quite often usage-based pricing is not in isolation. So I think from like a cash flow standpoint, as a company, you're thinking, well, we don't know how much cash we might generate from month to month or year to year if we're like pure consumption. That's why hybrid and I think models around like committed contracts and things become really popular because they help to manage some of that cash flow instance, because it's not a total guessing game. You have some contracts where like it's based, the contract, the amount, how you're being charged is based on usage, but you know exactly what's kind of owed to you each month or each year. So that can be a way to kind of manage the cash flow while still giving customers some flexibility and value of paying for what they use.
Awesome. Thanks a lot for all your time and all your answers to our questions, and you're super insightful. Hope everyone got something out of that. Like I learned a bunch.